Hello and welcome. My name is Stefan Poschik from CHC, and you're listening to the newest episode of our CHC expert interviews. Today, I have a really interesting guest, and he is basically Mr. LinkedIn. And probably you now can guess what he is all about. So hello and welcome. Please introduce yourself, Mark Williams.
Hello, thank you very much for that introduction. And it's good to be here. I'm Mark Williams. As you say, people often refer to me as Mr. LinkedIn. Yes, that is a good clue as to what I do. For the last 15 years, I've been training people in how to use LinkedIn effectively, all kinds of different purposes, whether it be a job seeker or a recruiter or a business development professional or a marketing professional or a business owner, all of those and more. I've covered in all of those years. So that's what I do. I spend most of my time working either with corporates and teams of people or even individuals on a one-to-one basis as well.
That's really awesome. Yeah. So let's start with the entrepreneurs and LinkedIn. So you hear so many different things. How often should I post? What is the best timing? What features should I use on LinkedIn? How should I use LinkedIn in general? So all the people who are in our coaching are always asking, okay, how can I generate leads and all these things? But let's go a little bit more into the details. Yeah. So there are multiple features. For example, this newsletter or LinkedIn Live, or you can set up these events. You can set up these groups. What are the three most important things and most important features an entrepreneur should use to leverage LinkedIn the best way possible at the moment?
I think before we get on to specific tools, I would say that the first thing is to understand your intention and what you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. You'll get most success from LinkedIn by using it as a tool to network, not market. So what I mean by that is that when people approach LinkedIn, they often, sometimes subconsciously, approach it with a kind of marketing mindset. You know, I'm here to promote what we do or what my business is all about. I'm here to find customers, and therefore I want to talk about what we do. Mm-hmm. Not realizing that actually what you're walking into is a networking environment. And so people that are there to really communicate, get to know other people, find out information from people, talk about things that they want to talk about. So the analogy is that you are, if you're offline, you're walking into a room of people, and that room of people are all very relevant and interesting to you. But you just kind of know that not just kind of common social politeness, but also a general business sense tells you that the last thing you want to do is just start walking up to people and selling to them or trying to promote your products. You know, it's like kind of, you know, having that watch salesman who walks up and opens their jacket and shows all their watches hanging in their pockets. You know, that's not what you want to do, and nobody would ever think of doing that on a face-to-face basis. But online they do. And so that's the first point is, okay, irrespective of what features I'm going to use and how I'm going to leverage LinkedIn, the reality is that if I approach this with a marketing mindset, I'm going to struggle because people don't want to see that, right? That's the last thing anybody in a networking environment wants to come across. Your job is to build visibility and relationships and use those relationships to leverage those networks and build more and more visibility as a result of that. The kind of aim that we're trying to get to that we will never quite reach, but it's a noble thing to try and achieve, is such high status and visibility in our markets, in our specialist areas, whatever that might be. So much so that if we were to knock on someone's door, or if someone was to come across us, they would instantly understand who we are, and not just in any old way, but actually see us as someone that they respect, look up to, want to listen to, feel that this is someone that's got something of value to offer them. And I'm not just talking about people that are selling services or expertise, anything. You know, we don't care what you're selling. I want to buy from you if I consider you to be someone that I can relate to, respect, and feel that I can understand a bit more about and get to know. People do business with people, always have done, always will do. But when people go online, they kind of forget that basic rule. And so that's kind of where we should be thinking about. in terms of your question about, well, which areas are most important to use, which features are going to be most beneficial to that? Well, look, that varies and depends on what you're trying to, how you want to present yourself. LinkedIn Live can be good. It's not available to everyone, but LinkedIn Live can be good, but you need to be confident that you're going to be strong in front of a camera. They do have audio lives as well, but equally you need to be a strong communicator who's going to feel comfortable in that environment. If that's not you, or you feel you need to build up to that, then one way of building visibility would be to post on LinkedIn, but obviously not necessarily video posts. So you can use a variety of different types of posts in order to put out a message, in order to get people's attention. Mm-hmm. There's a process that you need to go through here, though, which I've kind of skipped over there whilst jumping into features. But it all starts with understanding who your customer base is, who your target audience is, if you like. But it's not just a case of who they are. That's great, but I understand that they are this type of person in this type of role, working for this type of company. But you need more knowledge than that. You need to have a really strong understanding, a deep understanding of them and what makes them tick and what they're interested in and what they're going to want to talk about, because this is networking. So we're not pushing views onto them. We're not trying to get them to listen to us. We're trying to engage with them. So we want to understand what makes them tick. And one really good way of doing that, if you don't already know the answer to that question, and people typically do to a degree, but one way of enhancing that information, plus also really plays to the LinkedIn algorithm very well, is to actually start by just getting involved. So again, I always do this, but move away from LinkedIn for a second and think about working in an offline environment, walking into this room. You're not going to start just going up to people and talking about what you want to talk about. You're going to listen to them. You're going to hear what the conversation is, what kind of things seem to be interesting to people. You're going to pick up little bits here and there. You're going to start contributing with your own experience and things that you can add to the conversation. So do exactly the same on LinkedIn. Look for people to follow, look for posts in, not just in your feed, but you can search for posts as well. That's a really good feature to use, just using keywords, whatever it might be, whatever the subject matter is that you think is of interest to your target audience. Find content where people are talking about that. So join those conversations. That helps you develop and understand more about your marketplace and what's important.
Mike, sorry to interrupt you. When you say join the conversation, you also mean to engage with them. So like the post, reshare the post, comment on the post, and things like that, right?
Yeah, so good question. So the specifics of that are that you would comment on posts, right? You can like a post if there's nothing else you can do. So if it's important that you want other people to see that post, and maybe you're trying to foster a better relationship with the person that posted it, liking has value, as does reposting. Okay, pretty much the same thing, really, in terms of the effect. All that does is put it on the feed of some of your followers. All right. Reposting with thoughts, they call it now, which used to be resharing, is a waste of time. Don't bother doing that. That doesn't help at all. That's actually a very unsuccessful way of sharing content on LinkedIn. The most successful thing you can do, the most visible thing you can do, the most impactful thing you can do for you and the person that did the post is to comment on a post. It's significantly better than anything else you can do. Not least of which, because you are actually having a voice now. You're actually saying something. You're actually contributing. And people will start to judge you from that. It starts to bring you to their attention and they start to judge you. Now, that's other people in that thread on that particular post. Yeah. But in addition to that, when you comment on a post, your followers, some of them, not all of them, but some of your followers will now see that post in their feed, just as if you'd liked it. But the difference is that they see your comment underneath that post. They only see your comment initially, unless they click on the full comment thread. Yeah. And that allows them to learn more about you. So again, you're developing that relationship with this follower base that you're growing all the time. And they're the kind of activities that start to build something called relevance, which means that everybody that you are engaging with in those activities, you are building relevance with. And LinkedIn is always looking to understand relevance. And what I mean by that is it looks at you and says, Stefan and Mark are connected, right? But so what, right? Mark's got 12,000 connections. Stefan's got whatever, how many. Doesn't really mean a lot, just that they're connected. So what else, what other indications are there that they're actually really interested in each other? And obviously a big signal there would be that we're engaging with each other's content, or we are in the same comment thread and we are basically talking to each other in this comment thread, in this conversation. So that's a really good indicator. In addition to that, it looks at the post and it says, well, what kind of post was that? You know, who was it posted by? What was the subject all about? Were there any hashtags used there? So Mark's showing by commenting on that post, he's clearly interested in that type of content. So we know to give him more of that as well. So again, all the algorithm's ever trying to do is put stuff on your homepage feed that you want to see that's going to keep you there. That's all it cares about, really. So they're all the sort of the background things that you do all the time.
I need to jump one more time, Mike, because something what I always get asked, and I have my opinion on this. In my opinion, it's just stupid, but I want to have the opinion from an expert here. So many people know, okay, commenting is good, but they try to shortcut it. So what do they do? They comment with thanks or with a smiley or with thumbs up or something like that. So this is not what you are talking about, right? Because what you are talking about is really engaging with the content, engaging with the person, sharing your own opinion, writing more than just one or two words, right?
Sure. So there's two ways of looking at that. So let me be clear. First of all, we have comments and we have replies. So a reply, just saying, great, thanks, no problem, right? Doesn't really matter with a reply. Reply has limited visibility only within the thread of that particular post. Comments slightly different in that ideally you want to say something substantial because that's helping to educate people in terms of who you are. Again, you know, if we were stood in a room talking in a circle of people and all you did was just go, great point, yeah, great, yeah, nobody's really going to learn anything about you. Nobody's going to think much of you, right? So you're not really taking advantage of the situation that you possibly could do. Having said that, it's better than liking, right? Okay. So liking is like nodding. Okay, so there's a conversation going and I'm stood there, I'm saying nothing, but I'm just nodding my head. So nobody really notices that. So it has some value, it's better than nothing, but it has limited value. Now, if you commented and said, great post, right, that doesn't add a lot of value, but it's still better than a like.
Yeah.
Right. So because that means that more people will see that post. Right. So it's all about comparatives. Look, I mean, it is a big fault that a lot of people will just write very little in a comment. And that's because they kind of have read somewhere or heard someone like me say it's important to comment. And then they look at it and they go, I've nothing I can say. You know, I don't know what to say. Right. Well, my view would be on that. Number one, are you sure you've really got nothing to say? Or is it just because you're typing this onto the internet and onto LinkedIn and you think, you know, it's got to be perfect, which it doesn't have to be by any stretch of the imagination. But is it that? Or if it is that you've got really nothing to say on that, then move on, you know, just like it and move on to something else.
Yeah. And there are millions of opportunities where you can have an opinion on and when you have a really comment, right?
Yeah. Or alternatively, use it. So go, look, let's say it's a good post. I mean, a lot of posts aren't good enough to comment. The thing about when you post, you should make it comment worthy, right? A lot of posts aren't comment worthy. So you're looking at it and going, I'd like to add something here, but I don't know what to say really. It's just nothing to say to that. Forget those ones. But sometimes they're a post that you go, I should be able to comment on that, but I don't really know enough about it, or I haven't got really, I can't quite find the right words, or I'm not really sure I know enough yet. Well, you could use that as an opportunity and contact people that you do know, that, you know, that people that you know in business, but usually fairly well. But it might even be a potential customer or somebody you just met networking and you know is knowledgeable in this particular area. And you can either just contact them on LinkedIn or pick up the phone and say, look, I was reading this post the other day and what it said was this, 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 and this. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, I don't really know kind of what I think about that. And I thought, who does know about that? I thought I'd give you a ring and see what you think. There's all a way of helping to build relationships, but also building your own knowledge all the time. You are trying to be a really good added value member of this community. And if you feel you're not able to be that, then you've got work to do, right? So you've got to get out there and start finding out this stuff and start building all that kind of information into what you do. This is very important. It's not just LinkedIn, this, of course. You could be sat across the desk from a potential customer and the same thing come up, right? And do you know what you're talking about or not, right? So learn and develop and get better at it.
Yeah.
So use it in that way as well.
Okay, yeah, I definitely like this. So thank you for clarifying this, because I think a lot of people think they can take a shortcut and just scroll down and like watching cat videos on Facebook or stuff like that, like, and the LinkedIn algorithm will boost them into 100,000 followers, but it's not like that.
No, and LinkedIn don't help because they give you these suggested reply comments as well. These days, you see them sometimes underneath a post, and you think none of them make any sense at all. But they're just trying to encourage people that typically don't comment, trying to make it easy for them. But that's not really the name of the game.
True. Yeah, that's true. Awesome. So, Mark, what do you think about sharing more personal stuff and behind the scenes stuff also on LinkedIn? Because what we see, especially when it comes to influencers or building your brand or building your personal positioning as a person or as a brand, people tend to want to see more and more and more and more personal stuff behind the scenes, which is, of course, business related on LinkedIn. Hopefully. So I'm not talking about I'm sharing pictures of my cat and my dog shitting in the garden and stuff like that. Sorry for my but what I do, for example, at the moment is I'm sharing my 22 years of entrepreneurial journey, which is basically all business related, because the things what happens to me and for me in my life had a massive impact, and I could use the examples and I could use the things for my business. So what do you think about this? Does it make sense? Should people do more of this, or would you not recommend it?
Yeah, so absolutely should do more of it. Whatever you're going to talk about, so if you're going to put out content, whatever that subject might be, always try and approach it from a personal perspective. So you might think, here's a post, and I think this will be of interest to my target audience, which is the most important thing, right? So it's not what you want to talk about, it's what they want to hear or what they want to read. Then secondly, you take a step back and you go, right, so what's happened to me, or how can I relate to this? What things have I experienced personally that would have impacted this for me? So that may be directly the same thing, or it may be something similar that you can relate to it. But you're always better approaching it in that kind of authentic, this is my experience, this is what happened to me. And quite often that doesn't have to be a good thing. You know, that might be, you know, I really learned a lesson here, a bit of humility, showing that, you know, I made a big mistake here and this is what I learned from it, is often a good approach. And the point is that if people are going to do business with you, they feel like they need to get to know you. That doesn't mean they need to see what you do at the weekend necessarily, although I'm not dead against that. I think, you know, the occasional highly personal post is all right, so long as it doesn't dominate your content. But because, you know, as people get to know you, they like to know a little bit more about you, and they like to understand and feel that they can trust you. And all of those, you know, that's how you build, they're the building blocks to relationships, aren't they? Yeah. Always have been. And it's no different on LinkedIn. So, you know, I always talk about the sweet spot, which is this. So people say to me, oh, there's too much personal content on LinkedIn. And I say, well, actually, did you know the vast majority of content is not personal in any way, shape or form? You know, it's the vast majority, something over 80%, probably more like 90%, is purely business related content, right? No personal angle to it whatsoever. All right. But the reason why you're telling me that you think there's too much personal content on LinkedIn is because that's what you always see. Now, the primary distribution tool for content is us, what we do with posts that we see. Now, that means that the personal content is content that is being liked, commented on, and reposted by people. Right? That's why you're seeing it. So isn't that telling you something? So clearly, we don't want to be talking about what we do at the weekend all the time. That's not going to benefit us as a business. Yeah. But we do understand that people want to get to know us. So the sweet spot is where those two things cross over, and the way that you've described it is right. You know, so you relate your experience, pass on things that you've learned, things that you've done well, things that you haven't done so well. All of that stuff is what people really benefit from. The only thing I will be careful about, and I've been doing some work recently with a coach on this, is what people don't like is to be preached to. So don't ever approach LinkedIn. People like helpful stuff, right? But you have to understand the psychology of helping someone is not to go, I mean, obviously, you don't know who your audience is here. There's lots of people out there. If you were sat one-to-one with someone, you'd make a judgment on that person. But because this is a wider audience, you're communicating at scale here, you have to be a bit more careful. So you have to assume people aren't going to want to be taught something. They're going to be preached at. What they want to do is learn it for themselves, understand it for themselves. And all you're doing is making it easy for them to understand by explaining something that happened to you, right? And when you do it in that way, effectively, it's the same thing. But people don't like that what you need to do is this, 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 and this. Now, admittedly, if that was a 20-year-old just starting their career, they probably would appreciate that. But the audience is going to be wider than that. So it's better to take an approach of let them understand from your stories that you're telling what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. I like this. I like this suggestion. Thank you very much. What do you think about the newsletter opportunity? Should people use it on LinkedIn? Again, not everybody has access to it, but the people who have access to the newsletter in the creator mode, do you suggest it, or it's nice, but
obviously it depends on a variety of things, Stefan. But so the difference between a newsletter is that a newsletter is articles, but in a newsletter format, right? So you have subscribers to a newsletter. So you build a different subscriber list. Now, you can initially invite the people that follow you already, but there will be over time, other people will subscribe to your list. So I've got, just to put that in context, I've got something like 23,000 followers, something like 11,000 connections, and just approaching 10,000 newsletter followers. So they're all different cohorts, which obviously cross over a lot with each other, but different in that regard. And the advantage of a newsletter is that when I produce an article, which is long form content as opposed to posting, some industries just aren't going to be into that. You're going to find that your customer base or target audience just are never going to read long form content. They're just not interested. They haven't got the time. They don't perceive they've got the time. So it's not worth bothering with those. I wouldn't have a newsletter in those circumstances. But if you do feel that people are going to value long form content, then a newsletter is an absolute must if you've got the opportunity to do it, because you get subscribers. And when you've got subscribers, then every time you produce an article, if you associate it to that newsletter, they get notified, number one, so they get a push notification. They also get an email, but even better than that, the actual newsletter, the actual article, that you've written is embedded in that email. So it's like having an email list, really. And I remember when I first started newsletter, I got a couple of people contact me and said, I didn't sign up to this. Like, as if like I'd put them on some list for an email newsletter. And I'm like, well, I didn't sign up. This is just a LinkedIn thing. You've been invited to subscribe to a newsletter and you didn't realize you were going to get that by email as well. But that's just the way it works. I think people understand it a bit more now. The only downside, it's not really a downside, but the only thing you need to be aware of is that newsletters now are more widely available than they ever were before. So when I first started my newsletter, very few people had them. And so it was a novelty and people signed up and all the rest of it. And obviously you've got to keep that audience by giving them good value all the time. But I think these days it's a little bit like a bit overload. There was a time when it was a bigger problem than it is now, when literally it seemed like every week you were getting invites to newsletters, several invites to newsletters. And you think there's only so much content, long form content that I can consume, right? Yeah. So there's a bit of that, but I think they've corrected that. They went a bit crazy with it, and they've corrected that a little bit. And you don't get as many invites to newsletters as you used to. Yeah. But there is a little bit. I think people are a little bit like, how much more can I take on? But it's not a reason to not do it, right? It's just be mindful. You might not get, you're not going to get to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 subscribers that quickly. I think I got there in about 2 weeks, but let's say it was a different time. So
yeah. Plus, you had already a huge following on LinkedIn because you had a couple of tens of thousands followers already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I could go on and on and on and on, Mark. So I love our conversation. So thank you already for sharing all these insights. But I appreciate your time. So I want to go to the second step now and ask you 3, I call it rapid fire tips or insights you can share. So please, super short answers that we can get to know you a little bit better, or just what is super important for you in this area, okay? So you are already in business for such a long time, and you are on LinkedIn for forever, as long as LinkedIn exists, basically. So what are you most proud of so far in your life or in business?
I think I'm most proud of taking the risk to do LinkedIn training when nobody thought it was a sensible idea. the concept, the concept of training people how to use a social media platform was just ridiculous when I first started. So yeah, I'm most proud of kind of pushing through that and getting through that. You could argue I was lucky to back a horse that's done so well as LinkedIn, but that was impart insight as well. So
very good. That's really awesome. It was the same for me when I started with corporate health management about 15 years ago in my country. Basically, nobody was taking care of his employees, and they say, hey, screw you, I pay them and they have to shut up and do their work. And I talked about benefit programs and taking care of them and great culture and communication and stuff like that. So I know what you're talking about. Okay. So second question is, what are you most excited about right now? So many things are happening in the digital world, and but also in a positive, but also in a negative things. But what are you most excited about at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm excited by the opportunity for people to really develop stronger personal brands on LinkedIn, and I kind of mean that not just for me, but for everyone. That we have a platform now that is really significant, that pretty much everybody uses, and people are engaging with it. And it won't last forever, but the opportunity right now and over the next 5 years or so is really powerful for us. So, there's so many ways of being able to develop those relationships and develop a following. And LinkedIn's been good for the last 5 years or so, but it's not going to last forever. So there is that window of opportunity, and I'm excited to see how LinkedIn are, in some respects they're not, but I can get onto that a different day, but in many respects are understanding that content creators, the likes of me and you, are the people that make the platform, and they're buying into that with creator mode and stuff like that. And that's an exciting time for all of us.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I never saw so many new features launched like LinkedIn launched, I think, in the last couple of weeks or months. I don't think they launched so many new features in the last 5 years or something in combined. Yeah, so definitely. And yeah, last question here. What is your personal vision for the future? Where do you want to go with your business or as a person? So what's your vision?
Oh, look, I'm at a stage in my career where I don't think too far ahead.
Come on, Mark.
No. If you grabbed me when I was, 10 years ago, I'd have had a different answer. But now I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm very lucky to be in a position to, I don't have to work particularly hard to generate business, and I have no intention to grow my business any more than it is. If anything, sometimes it's difficult to juggle everything. And I'd almost like to slow down a little bit from that. But that, I'm at a stage in my career where that's logical to do so. Many other people and me myself in the past would view that very, very differently. I think you go through different stages in life. Right now, it's an exciting time for LinkedIn. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm happy for that to carry on as it is. But people sometimes approach me and say, I can show you a way that you could double the size of your business. And I'm going, go away. I'm not interested in doing that. That's the last thing I need. So understand your audience, right?
Yeah. So basically you like where you are and you want to stay where you are, right? So
yeah, I want to be able to get out on the golf course a bit more, basically.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Mark, thank you for sharing this. Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people want to connect with you and want to reach out to you when they hear this interview. So what's the best way? Probably I know it already, but what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, there are two ways really with me. I mean, obviously LinkedIn itself, and I'm sure you can put a link to my profile, but feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to the newsletter. But also I have a podcast. The newsletter, actually, the way I use the newsletter is actually the show notes of my podcast. So every week I talk about LinkedIn for about an hour or so, all the new features and discussion points around kind of where LinkedIn are going. It's not for people that are completely new to LinkedIn, but anybody that's interested in this platform, where it's going, what it's all about, how to use it, all that kind of stuff. That's what we cover, and that's called LinkedIn Formed.
Perfect. So we will definitely post both in the comment section and also in the posting when we launch the interview. So thanks again. At least for me, it was already super, super, super valuable. And I know it will be super valuable for our audience too. And I would love to continue our conversation. So for now, thank you. Have a great day. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation about LinkedIn and how we can support each other in a better way, Mark. And
good stuff.
And to all of you out there, listeners, just do what Mark just told you and reach out to him, connect with him, subscribe for his newsletter, and definitely join into his podcast, because you will learn a bunch more what you already heard and do something great for your own. So bye for now, and thank you for joining in.
Thank you. Bye.